Shalom and welcome to another Chamor podcast from abedan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. Today is the 6th of January 2025. That is, on the Gregorian calendar, the Feast of the Epiphany, which is when John the Baptist identified Jesus as the Lamb of God. Jesus, of course, was baptized and immediately went out into the desert to fast, where he was tempted by the devil for 40 days and nights. And when he came back in, after that, John the Baptist saw him and identified him to his disciples and says, "There goes the Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world." And his disciples followed Jesus, and he also did the same the next day. Jesus hung around Jordan for a couple of days before going on back to Galilee. So that happens today. It's at the end of the fasting period. Read the Bible carefully, and you'll see that that's what's actually happening. You have to read, of course, a concordant reading between the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in order to see this. But once you've read that and you see, oh yes, that's very clear. He was baptized, he went into the desert, he came out of the desert. John identifies him. And that's today, the Epiphany. The first of Shavat is a day of Jesus' birthday, according to Judaism. It's associated with the day after Tekufat Tevet. The first of Shavat occurred in the year of Jesus' birth. It occurred twice in the year. It occurred on the 6th of January, and later in the year, it occurred on the 25th of December, which is why you had these two dates as competing dates for the birthday of Jesus in the early church. But in the end, 25th of December won, and 6th of January remained as a feast of the Epiphany for basically the identification or the exposition, revelation of Jesus as the Lamb of God by John the Baptist to his disciples. Well, there's some halakha associated with this time of the year as well, which is important for Jews to know. And I thought that maybe some Messianic Noahides, Christians, Muslims might be interested to know that too. So I'm going to tell you about that in today's show. Today, the Feast of the Epiphany is also known as the Nitl Gadol. Anything before New Year is called Nitl Katan, and everything after New Year is called Nitl Gadol. It's the 12th day of, it's not the 12th day. The 12th day of Christmas was yesterday, but this day, the Epiphany, is also known as the Nitl Gadol. So Nitl Gadol can keep on going on until the sun enters Capricorn, which is basically much later. It's on the 19th of January these days, at least in the evening on the 19th of January is when the sun enters Capricorn. But as I said, everything after New Year's Day is Nitl Gadol, and everything before that is Nitl Katan. So the halakha concerning this time, which I want to relate to the Secret Santa tradition, comes down to us from Israel Isserlin. Israel Isserlin lived from 1390 until 1460 in Austria. And it basically lets us understand a halakhic basis behind the Secret Santa tradition. You think, well, how on earth is this possible? Secret Santa, does it come from St. Nicholas? He is famous for going along most famous for punching Arius on the nose in the Council of Nicaea, but also famous for dropping money into the shoes, allegedly, of young ladies who couldn't afford a dowry or something like that, and he would help them out as the bishop would distribute money that day. Apparently, he did it secretly, and that's why they have the idea of Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, distributing presents to people's shoes or stockings in the world today. But there is also the idea of a halakhic basis behind Secret Santa coming down from, as I said, Israel Isserlin. Now, the halakha is recorded in something called Terumas Hadeshen, Siman number 195, and it's a responsa. It's a response to questions, and the question in which gives us the basis, the halakhic basis for a Secret Santa, comes like this. It says, in many cities, it is the custom of Jews to send gifts to priests and nobles on the 8th day after Nitl when they make their new year. That's the 8th day of Christmas. That is New Year's Day. Should we be concerned about any danger of this or not? Now, you might think to yourself, why would we be asking about any danger concerning this? And the answer is because the 8th day of calendar, the 8th day of Nitl, is the 1st of Shavat, which is New Year for trees, which is where the Christian New Year comes from. It's also the Feast of the Circumcision. Christians observe that, or used to observe that as the Feast of the Circumcision. Let's be honest, modern Christians don't seem to observe anything much. They don't really know anything about their faith. They've lost so much. They just think, oh, I'm a Christian. They call themselves Christians, and they go, sorry, no insult intended here, but as a Jew who has studied Christian history and faith, I'm really astounded sometimes when I hear Christians talking about their faith and not really understanding the origins of their faith or the things that they're supposed to be doing. Compared to Jews and Muslims who know a lot more about their faith, it's pretty appalling the level of what can I say? How much Christian faith has degraded just since the 1950s. I'm certain if I was to talk to somebody in the 1950s, they would know much more. But in this day and age, Christians really don't know anything about their faith, origins or traditions or anything. And I'm talking about priests as well. Priests and bishops, they don't know. Pastors, they don't know. So it's really unusual to find a Christian who actually knows anything about their faith other than, oh, well, Jesus died for my sins. Basically, that's all they know. But no insult intended here. It's more of take it as a challenge from me to you. If you are wanting to, if that gets you on edge, if that triggers you, if that winds you up, then take it as a challenge and go and study the history and origins of your faith and the traditions of your faith. And then, hopefully I've done something good for you by challenging you with that comment. But anyway, the new year that Christians follow is the New Year for trees. It's the first of Shavat. And that date, as I mentioned, is also associated in Judaism as the birthday of Jesus. The first of Shavat, New Year for trees, was according to the school of Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai was the school who controlled the Sanhedrin when Jesus of Nazareth was sentenced to death by the Sanhedrin and crucified by the Romans. So after that, Gamaliel, who became the head of the Sanhedrin, and he took the Sanhedrin in the direction following Halakha of Beit Hillel instead of Beit Shammai. Now, the Halakha of Beit Shammai was continued to be taught and passed down in Judaism among Jews, but we follow Gamaliel's school instead, and he is the one who gave us the tradition that we follow and practice the Halakha according to the Beit Hillel instead of Beit Shammai. When Beit Shammai was in control of the Sanhedrin, not only were they responsible for sentencing Jesus to death and handing him over to the Romans to be crucified, which is completely against Hillelite Halakha. All of that is completely impossible according to Hillelite Halakha. We say in the Talmud, it says that the things that they did, that they passed 18 measures, which were darker, a more evil, more wicked time for the children of Israel than the sin of the golden calf. So, since Orthodox Jews, modern Jews, follow the Halakha of Beit Hillel, there is a danger in being considered to be following the Halakha of Beit Shammai instead. Now, Beit Hillel says that New Year for trees is on the 15th of Shavat, not on the 1st of Shavat. Beit Shammai says it's on the 1st of Shavat. Beit Hillel says we'll follow the 15th of Shavat instead, to distinguish ourselves from Beit Shammai, no doubt. So the thing is, Christian tradition descends from Sadducees. From many priests became converts to early Christian faith who were from that Sanhedrin of Beit Shammai, and they followed the Shamuti Halakha. And so the new year for Christians is 1st of January. That's the 1st of Shavat. So if we are sending gifts to Christians on the 1st of Shavat, it could be perceived that we're celebrating the 1st of Shavat as the New Year for trees, according to the Halakha of Beit Shammai, rather than the Halakha of Beit Hillel. You see? And that can be considered dangerous because people would think that we are of Beit Shammai rather than Beit Hillel, and then we would be liable for vengeance, for example, from Christians who are going to take revenge on Beit Shammai for sentencing Jesus to death. And that's something that we are not responsible for. We didn't do that. It was Beit Shammai who did that. And anybody who says, yes, we did that, is a follower of Beit Shammai, not a follower of Beit Hillel, who would say, no, we couldn't possibly do that because it's illegal for us to hand the Jew over to the Romans. That would have been completely illegal. Even if that Jew was guilty of a crime, we could never hand that Jew over to the Romans for punishment. Only Beit Shammai could do that. Beit Hillel could not do that. Now, if we follow and observe and celebrate the 1st of Shavat as a new year for trees, then we will look like Beit Shammai, and then we would be guilty of a sin which is greater than that of the golden calf, according to the Talmud. That's what the Talmud teaches us. So is there any danger in giving presents to our Christian friends on the 8th day after Nittel when they make their new year? That is, they who are descended from the school of Shammai. when they make their new year. Should we be concerned about any danger in this or not? And the response came from Israel that, as I said, in the Terumas Hadeshen Siman number 195, that it appears we should be careful regarding this practice not to send it any gift on the actual day of the festival, lest they think we are celebrating, but rather on the day before or after that. Now, another reason why this should be discussed, not just like, well, do we have to really have a halakha concerning about when we give presents to Christians? Wouldn't it just mean that we are respecting their holiday, and there's no reason why they would think that we're actually celebrating New Year for trees at this time? How could they possibly, perceive that we were celebrating it? And the reason is because of something that comes down to us from Hai Gaon, the 10th century Hai Gaon, who said that we should observe calendar with a fresh supply of sweet water. So there was a tradition of going out to get a fresh supply of sweet water during the holiday of calendar. So you can have different opinion. People say when on the calendar, on the first day of calendar, on the last day of calendar, which is the 8th day of calendar, or sometime during the calendar holiday. So there are different traditions of when you go and get your fresh supply of sweet water. But the tradition is that it should be after the Tekufat of Tevet, which means the turn of Tevet. So when Tevet has passed, then that would be the 1st of Shavat. So on the 1st of Shavat, which is the 8th day of calendar, the New Year for trees, people would go and get a fresh supply of water. And you've got lots of Jews going down to get a fresh supply of sweet water from springs and various things like that. And it would look like we were observing some kind of holiday or celebration, especially if we give presents to our Christian friends on that day as well. So there was a real danger of being perceived as celebrating the 1st of Shavat as the New Year for trees, and therefore being counted as the Beit Shammai, who had sentenced Jesus to death, rather than the Beit Hillel, which all Orthodox Jews are belonging to from the time of when Gamliel took over the Sanhedrin. You might remember Gamliel. The story of Gamliel is in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, when the Shamuti Sanhedrin is discussing what to do with punishing Peter, St. Peter, whether he should be punished or not. And Gamliel stood up and said, leave him alone, because what they're doing is from God, then nothing can stop them. And if it's not from God, then it'll die out and we won't have to worry about it. So ignore it. And so they actually decided to punish Peter, but not execute him, not hand him over to the Romans for execution. And that was thanks to Gamliel saying, leave him alone. Gamliel later became the head of the Sanhedrin, the Nasi of the Sanhedrin, and when he became the head of the Sanhedrin, that was it for Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai was over, it was outlawed, it was finished, it was done, gone forever. Beit Shammai was mostly Sadducees. Sadducees were on the Beit Shammai side. They have a view which is called Pshat, interpretation of Torah. They were Pharisees too, but the Shamuti Pharisees got along with the Sadducees, whereas Beit Hillel Pharisees did not get along with the Sadducees at all. There was no sort of attempt to make an alliance with the Sadducee priests who ran the temple, the Boethusians and the Sadducees who ran the temple. There was no attempt under Gamliel, but under Beit Shammai there was. They tried to kind of have a Jewish nationalist movement, and that was responsible for handing Jesus over to the Romans in order to preserve the sort of Jewish nationalist approach. Anyway, Gamliel abolished that, and Orthodox Judaism comes down from Gamliel. Gamliel is also a saint in Christian tradition. They call him Saint Gamaliel, but it's the same person and the same one who is mentioned in the Sanhedrin there at that time. So we follow the Halakha for Beit Hillel. The 15th of Shavat is the New Year for trees. But we do have this practice of going to get a fresh supply of water during calendar, which comes down to us from the Hai Gaon, the 10th century Hai Gaon. 10th century means he lives in the 900s, if you don't know that. I've noticed a lot of young people, especially millennials, not being able to identify the difference between things like 10th century equals 900s, and 19th century means 1800s, and things like that. They seem to have a difficulty, so just make that clear for anybody who's too young to have had the correct education concerning that. So the 10th century Hai Gaon says this is how you observe calendar. And so the question is a legitimate question. Should we be concerned of any danger giving presents to our Christian friends? And he says, it appears we should be careful regarding this practice not to send it on the actual day of the festival, lest they think we are celebrating New Year for trees at that time, but rather on the day before or the day after. And later also, we have the Rima in Shulchan Aruch Yore De'ah 148, part 12, where he writes, if a person wishes to send, and he was writing the 1500s, that's the 16th century, if a person wishes to send a gift to a Gentile on the 8th day after Nittel, which they call New Year's, when they view it as a good omen if they receive a gift, he should send it the night before. Okay, so the tradition is definitely not to send it on the day itself. The problem is, of course, people are not always familiar with such obscure bits of halakha, and they might be sending gifts to their Christian friends on the 8th of calendar, which is the 1st of Shavat, the 1st of January on New Year's Day. And then later discover that, or when talking to somebody, overhearing a conversation, discover that there is this halakha not to do so. They should do it on the night before or on the day after. And then, it's a simple thing, out of guilt and shame, pretend that they didn't send any gifts to anybody on that day. Or as they were in the process of sending gifts to that day, if their gift arrived on that day, then to deny that they sent that gift. In other words, to claim anonymity for the gift which they themselves sent. In other words, the gifts would become secret presents at that time, hence the origin of a secret Santa tradition. Now, this, of course, was not necessarily Santa at that time, but a secret gift bringer dropping off presents and then nobody knowing where the present came from, because it actually is a present from a Jewish friend, and the Jewish friend then realizing the halakha, denying that they were involved in sending this gift at all, is actually a halakhic basis for the origin of a secret Santa or a secret gift bringer at that time. And over the years, nowadays we call that a secret Santa. But in those days, it was just an anonymous gift bringer who brought presents or dropped off presents anonymously, and nobody knew where the gifts came from. So you see, there is a halakhic basis for the idea or the concept of a secret Santa, and that a secret Santa practice is absolutely very, very Jewish, which people might not have realized beforehand, but there is the halakhic basis for it. So we've looked at a few pieces of halakha today. We looked at the halakha as recorded by Israel Iserlin and the Rima reiterating that. We looked at Hai Gaon's halakha concerning the calendar tradition. We've also looked at the why a little bit. We talked about why we should avoid appearing to be following the halakha of Beit Shammai, why it's important to follow the halakha of Beit Hillel, and how all of this ends up with the idea of not being responsible for any gifts which have arrived on the 1st of Shavat, on the New Year's Day, even though we want to send gifts to our friends at that time. So, Secret Santa. Well, I hope you found that interesting for today's broadcast, and I'm wishing you all out there. Today is a Christmas Eve for the Russian Orthodox Church and other people who are following the Julian calendar. So I wish all of those of you who are on the Julian calendar a very blessed and happy and holy Christmas. That is a Nittel Gadol. And I hope that you found this little story about the halakha for Nittel Gadol very interesting. Okay, God bless you all. Take care and shalom.